Welcome back to the Driven Leadership Podcast, everybody. We are stoked to be back. We got Austin, Eric joining the table today, and we're talking about engagement. And I already think that we're setting ourselves up for a multi-part series here because engagement is such a beast in leadership. And correct me if I'm wrong, Eric, one that most people, even though it's this huge beast to tackle in your business, it's one that people don't have the firmest grasp on most of the time. How do you measure it? How do you increase it? What does it look like? What does it feel like? So we're going to tackle some of those big questions today. And so I want to get started kind of how we've done before in really defining some terms. When we're talking about engagement in a business, what are some keywords that come up whenever you think about that? What are some key actions, some fruit of engagement in a business that you guys have seen?
Yeah, engagement is one of these interesting words. It became quite a buzzword not too long ago, and when it became a buzzword, I got really excited about it because when you teach leadership, it's often just really hard to get your hands around the impact. And what I saw with engagement, especially a lot of Gallup's work, Gallup has done years and years worth of studying on engagement. And what I started noticing in their work is they were taking the intangible and making it tangible. Because you walk into a culture that's engaged, you can feel it. It's almost a feeling of, it's just different. Like people care.
Yeah, the whole vibe is different. Yeah.
Right. There's an energy to it. It's just different. And then you walk into one that's not, and it's so apparent. And you go, well, what does that equal to the bottom line? Like, what's actually happening here? I can feel it, and I don't want to come back here because it's disengaged or actively disengaged from that standpoint. But the interesting thing about it is up until, and there's some other studies and things like that, but Gallup started doing it, not most years they do a study called the State of the American Workforce. I think it's every other year. And what they started doing is they put things in three categories. They put them in the engaged category, which those are those workers that they come in and man, they're in it. Like they're the champions of the business. They're excited about the work they're doing. They are held to a high standard and they want to be. They're not really in the excuse mindset. They're more in the how do we solve it or how do we step into it mindset.
Yeah,
and then
they're bought in.
They're bought in. And just overall, it's a completely different feel. Things may not always be going right for them, so their attitude on different things that are going on may fluctuate a little bit, but they're still in it. They're bringing 100% of what they have that day on a consistent basis. You know, they're coming in.
I think that's a really important point of everything may not be going super well in the day-to-day. There's still issues, there's still problems, but how do they approach those problems? That's a huge differentiator for engagement.
Yeah, Mary coined the phrase. She's like, you may only feel like bringing 60%, like you're hurting. You know, something happened personally. Yeah, we got it. But they're bringing 100% of that 60%. And on most days, you know, it's 100%, or some days it's 110%, which I know, you know, you can't get there, but yes, you can. So, but then Gallup puts it in three categories. You got engaged, you got disengaged, which is this middle group, and then actively disengaged. And the disengaged, they're doing their jobs. That got coined in during COVID as the quiet quitters. They're the ones that are in there and they're in the meetings, but they're not really in the meetings. They're not like excited about what's going on. They're not pushing to have their voice heard or their ideas brought out. But they're getting the job done. And a lot of times that's where people seem to struggle the most is with this middle group and what do I do with them? How do I work with them? And then there's the bottom group, which is the actively disengaged. And you know, the actively disengaged, if you're looking for it, they're obvious. I mean, they just are. They're the, you know, I always say there's the aware actively disengaged and the unaware. So if you're an unaware actively disengaged and you talk to them and you work with them and you actually care about them and you want to see things move, the unaware, as they become aware, there's some percentage of those that move into a better category.
So you mean by that, like they themselves are unaware that they're actively disengaged, or they're aware that they're actively disengaged?
Right. So so that's the person that, man, they're in the meetings and they finish the meeting and they're like, oh God, there it is again. And they walk out and they start gossiping with the person that they talk to all the time. Man, he comes in and he does this or she does this and blah, blah, blah. And they're doing all this stuff and they're just frustrated. And it's usually from past hurts. I always say people don't show up at a job disengaged in most cases. That means you're really bad at hiring if they do.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Right?
You shouldn't have brought them on.
Right. So they come in and there's an engagement level, and then things happen. You know, maybe they don't connect with their direct manager very well. Or maybe they're decisions that are made in the company that seem very selfish for the company aren't explained very well, and there's assumptions that are made, and it becomes, oh, they don't really care about us. Or
trust gets broken.
Yeah, or my values aren't met, right? So I believe in some way that we should be doing things, and I believe very strongly in it, and then the company has a different value system or says it's a value and then doesn't match up with it, and our interpretation of that is they're not this. And then we start to justify our bad behavior, right? We start gossiping. We know gossiping is not going to help anything, but it makes us feel better. You know, because we need a little tribe around us. We need people that are bitching and moaning with us. So, I mean, we do. We really do. Yeah. And so we start to do it. It usually starts at home. You know, we come home and it's like whoever's there, we're kind of going, man, you wouldn't believe what Connor did today, right? And we start doing that. And then it gets past that, and you know, whoever's there at home starts to go, man, I can't believe you're dealing with that. You shouldn't deal with that. That's ridiculous, blah, blah, blah. All this stuff. So you go, huh, I think you're right.
It snowballs from there.
Yeah, so it's and then you move it into work. But anyway, so this unaware aware. So the certain percentage of the unaware, when made aware, their intent is not to sabotage the company, and that's really what that actively disengaged is. Their intent is to really create some stability for themselves, to feel as though they're okay, and they need to throw up these protective measures or have other people in there or sabotage to create some type of internal struggle that's going on. So there's a percentage there. The other, the aware, meaning aware that I'm actively disengaged, and I always say this, and I'm not really joking, they're terrorists in the organization. I mean, people laugh at that, but I'm like, no, straight up, they're coming in, they're sabotaging productivity, they're pulling away buy-in, they're creating a group of people over time that go against the goals and the initiatives of work. That's a terrorist. Yeah. You know, it's just, we look at it because it's business that it's, okay, it's not like in the Middle East and where we have guns and things going on, but it's a similar thing. It's corporate terrorism is what's taking place. So, and then you've got some companies, now you get into how they handle conflict within the organization. And if you start to have that corporate terrorist that's going on, if we take care of it, obviously in a way that is, you know, you're giving them the chance to turn around and move through it. You're talking through their issues. You're doing all that stuff. If you're not getting somewhere, we take action. The rest of the team sees that and they're going, okay, you know what? Maybe it's not the way I want it, but at least they're taking action and I'm not having to deal with that. And then they kind of get more buy-in. But, anyway,
I really like how you're going through that, Eric, and because I think, and you said this earlier, that engagement is like this really popular term that has kind of coined itself. And before engagement, to me, it was culture. Yeah. It's like, oh, we have to have this really good culture. And the words that come to my mind in that are mostly, or what I hear from people in it, is it's fluffy. It's like, oh, are people happy? Are people joyful? Are people these things? And that's not what culture is, and that's not what engagement is. And it's so much more than that. And it's costing businesses. I think there's a statistic I pulled up here. It's like low engagement cost U.S. companies over $350 billion. I mean, and I know you throw out a lot of stats from Gallup's work too in when we're teaching this, and just kind of putting it out there, like, this isn't a happiness gauge. This isn't a monitor or a thermometer of your team just really just being happy with each other. Yeah. This is how they're getting work done, how work is effectively getting done, the performance quality measures, cohesion. I mean, this is affecting every aspect of business, not just one, you know, it feels good when you come into work.
Can we dissect that number real quick? Like the $300 million number, why is it costing businesses that much to have disengaged employees?
Well, it's $350 billion with a nice big B. Yeah. No, you're good. I was blown away by that number.
Even
$350
million is like, well, okay, that's a lot. We should do something about it. $350 billion is like, where is that coming from? And that's my question is like, what does that look like practically? Like in somebody with 20 employees, they're losing X amount of dollars based on that statistic. They have to be. But what does that practically look like? Where are you losing that money? How does that happen?
Yeah, there's another stat. This is still Gallup's work, but it moves a little bit based on what's going on. But it is, you have a disengaged worker, and you're paying them $100,000, and they're in that disengaged category. Then you're getting about 30% of the actual value of that worker because they're in that disengaged. Meaning you're leaving on the table, give or take. Well, I guess it's 66%. It's about it's pretty unbelievable. If you just look at that as a salary standpoint, there's 60, 70 grand per person that falls in that category that's making 100 grand. But the bigger things are when they get into, and they're measuring the engaged organization versus just the normal, the average organization. So it's the engaged organization is 9 to 1. It is 9 engaged for every 1 disengaged or actively disengaged. And I always say in that company, if you're the one that's disengaged, you're not going to stay there long. You're either going to leave the company or you're going to shift into being in an engaged state because you're surrounded by people that won't accept that. Like that's why they're at that level. And then the average organization in America is 2 to 1, but it's not 2 to 1 the way you think. It's 2 either disengaged or actively disengaged for every 1 engaged. So it's the weight and the pressure and the tribal, you got to swim upstream. You're going against the norm in those companies because the majority of people are disengaged at a minimum and they're just going through the motions, that looks like. You were asking about behaviors earlier. Disengaged is, it's not my job. It's I'm too busy to deal with that. They're in meetings. They're not really voicing their opinion. They don't come with creative things. They're not really planned out or thought out. They're just kind of doing their job and getting through it. The actively disengaged are sabotaging. We use a cookie example in a lot of our classes, right? So it's the engaged sees a cookie on the floor, they pick it up. The disengaged, they avoid it and they walk right past it. And the actively disengaged go step on the cookie. But the reality of it, when you talk about how much it's costing a business, it shows up, and they can measure it. It shows up in things like sick days. It shows up in injuries. It shows up, yes, in sales, absolutely in sales. You take one quality salesperson and take them from being engaged, motivated, excited about what they're doing, going out there and connecting with clients, to going through the motion, their sales will drop so dramatically, it's unbelievable. Yeah. But then all the efficiencies in the business, right? They say it's 200% different between engaged and actively engaged and the average, not even actively disengaged. So there's those billions of dollars that are sitting there, and I've seen numbers all over the place for it. Yeah.
Well, I think too, you have that, right? So it's keeping someone who's not working at their full potential, and the other side where that money comes in is in turnover, right? Because you get further and further down this road of disengagement, you're going to turn over, and I think the stat's 20% of employees' salary you'll spend to replace them. In some form or fashion. And so totaling $11 billion is in employee turnover based upon the work I was reading in Gallup's State of the Union from last year.
State of the workplace.
State of the work. What did I say?
You said State of the Union. I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. You got politics on the brain.
And I was chuckling earlier because we talk about Gallup so much. We just need to be sponsored by Gallup's State of the Union Workforce Report.
I mean, but it's so interesting because it's a free tool you can go download, and the work that they've done on it, if you put in the work, really does show the gap of what this is costing business.
It just gives a lot of perspective.
Yeah, I mean, and it's real data. They're really crunching the numbers, and it's is useful for us to know. And so we have people that are not fulfilling their full potential in work, but we also have this massive amount of turnover. Then you have the training cost on top of that to get a person up to speed on that. And then on top of that, you have project initiatives that fall through the cracks when you have, a change of arms, if you will. And so just adding all of those things up, it creates this massive chasm. And what I've found is, though, you have two groups of people. You have people that I've talked to that are, we want to solve this problem and we really want to do this, but it's not the time. I don't know how to do it, or I don't have the budget to do it. And because it's one of those things that's hard to grasp around. And so what's your experience, Eric, with like talking people through that? Or
before we get into solution, because I definitely want to get there, that's kind of like the roadmap of this episode. I think we've really effectively defined those types of workers. I want to get to how do you swing the pendulum back from disengaged to engaged. But before we get there, what have y'all seen as root causes to bring employees from engaged to disengaged, potentially to active disengaged? Or I imagine some people bounce between actively and just disengaged, right? So the bottom two. What are some things that happen to get people in that? Because like you said, Eric, people aren't hired as disengaged. They become disengaged. Yeah. So what happens?
Yeah, so 70% of all, and this is in Galb's work, go read it. But
next episode, we just read through the entire Galb.
That would be super beneficial if people would listen to it.
It would be. Yeah.
But 70% is on management. So 70% of all engagement, we determine engagement by our management style, how we manage, how we show up, how we lead, how we give vision, direction. And one really interesting one, as you look through the graphs that we tend to lean on when we're doing trainings, is the idea of recognition. If you recognize employees, engagement goes up, even if you're just focused on their negative traits.
Like
and if
recognizing
you focus on
the work they're doing.
Yeah, just recognizing them, right? One of the questions is, does my manager or supervisor ignore me? And engagement drops to, I think it's like 1%, and actively disengaged and disengaged skyrockets at that point. Yeah. And you go, well, no manager or leader out there is, unless they have just really good self-awareness, is going to go, hey, I ignore my team. But what that looks like is, they don't follow up when they say they do. They don't listen when people need to be heard or cared for, or they don't solve problems effectively or swiftly that deals with that person, and so they feel ignored. And so perception's reality if they feel that way. And so lack of recognition is huge in engagement. If you're ignoring them or not following up, not following through as a manager, something easy to do to kind of start flipping this pendulum. And I know you said don't list solutions. Sorry, there you go anyway. But that's one of the major ones I've seen that will pull down a person from engaged to.
I can literally hear the voice of other people saying that, of like, well, I spent 3 months on this project and nobody even said anything about it, so why am I even going to try? Or I hit a deadline and then the deadline didn't even matter because they just ignored it, or it sat in their inbox for a week. So the next project, I'm not going to bust my ass like trying to get it in on time or trying to make it the best it can be, because they don't care. They didn't see it. They just ignored it. So that's a huge one. And that's, I think, in every workplace I've ever worked, comes up all the time.
It comes down to this pendulum that's on either side. It's high performance accountability and care. And people look at these two things as an or. It's like I can have high performance or I can care. And and they're just not at opposite ends of the spectrum. They are an and in a big way. So it's like how do I, when someone feels that I have the support of my manager, they care and they listen and they allow me to figure things out and to make mistakes, and I'm trusted and I'm responsible, but I'm also, they know enough about me to know my values, what's important to me, so that they're not, I saw someone, there's a guy I follow on TikTok, and he does these, actually there's a couple of them, that they do these employee issues where they're like, people are like, I had this issue with my manager, and they're kind of talking through what was the issue. And I hear it over and over and over again, where it's like for example, they're on vacation and the manager goes, hey, you got to come in today. And that is such a blatant, disrespectful conversation. They've been approved. They do all these things. They've done it all right. They leave, they go on vacation. And then the manager calls them and goes, hey, you got to come in anyway. Okay. So what you just did is you proved that no matter what, you care about the production over me. Because this vacation is about me and my family and me spending time, me shutting it down, me doing what I need to do. And There was one where the manager called the guy's mom because it was in the employee records because the guy wouldn't pick up.
No.
He calls the mom and is like, "Hey, I need to get a hold of him." Right? So extreme example.
I hope that mom chewed out that. She went like full Mama Bear mode and was like,
I don't know.
"You sorry son of a." I really wish you went in at him.
Yeah, but you look at things like that are happening out there, and it may not be that example, it may be something else, but they feel, in some way, they feel disrespected, uncared for, unappreciated. Something happens, and it's usually not one thing. It's usually a series of events. And what we do as human beings is we're paying attention and we're going, okay, and maybe they didn't happen to me. Maybe it happened to my coworker. And I see them treat this
You
one
just see
coworker.
it happen. Yeah.
That's all it takes.
Yeah.
You know, because I'm like, okay, they're doing it to them. Who's the real person here? Why is that going on? So it's leadership behavior directly correlated to Austin's point. They say it's 70% of engagement is your direct manager, that relationship. But if I'm a putz as a manager and I don't really care about people and all I care about is the production or myself or whatever's going on, and the more I lean into me versus we, the more it's about me instead of how we get there together, the more care goes away. You can hold high performance standards all you want to. If the care is not there, you're going to have this kind of tense. It can work, by the way. It can. You can have high performance standards, hit it or get out. You're going to have higher turnover. You have people that are frustrated. You're going to have all those things, but you'll probably get high performance. And if you're okay with that, then fine. But you get a bunch of the, cutthroat, make it happen, that kind of a boiler room type of a feel. Cool. But we spend more time at work than we do anywhere else. Why not also enjoy it? Which all that requires is if we show the care and the high performance accountability and we work them together, get some incredible results.
Yeah. Like you said, it's not two ends of a pendulum. It's like you can have more than one burner on the stove at the same time. It takes a little bit more focus and it takes a little bit more intentionality, but anybody can manage two burners on the stove. You can manage 3 or 4 on a stove, right? So it's just about what you put your focus into.
I can't cook. That's bad analogy.
I was wondering why you were shaking your head. I was like,
Nah, dude.
is that a bad metaphor or
I learned from my mom. Okay, and my mom, God love her, we'll send her this clip. My mom, I remember one year, it's totally off track, but just stay with me. I walked in and there was water boiling. And there was black stuff floating across the top. And from then on out, we had this joke. It's like, my mom is such a bad cook, she actually boiled water. Or she burnt water.
Burnt water, yeah.
Yeah, and it was actually the pan just had fallen apart and had risen to the top because it had been cooking so long. But I learned from her. So there you go. Love you, Mom. Love you.
I really hope y'all didn't use that water. That's really my biggest concern in that story.
I have no idea. I don't know.
Did we throw that water out?
Well, we'll just trust Eric to turn the oven on.
I'm more concerned. Did she throw the pan out? Which is probably a no. We probably use that pan again. But anyway, but I get your point. Awesome. 5 burners going at once. Can we do it? Yes, we can. And there's an art. There's this art to it. I mean, it's like how you handle conflict and your emotional intelligence, all these terms we keep throwing out. If you go in, it's not, here's step 1 through 5, here's your program that you're on and how you build great connection with your team. Like, you've got to work at connection. You got to work at relationships. You got to authentically care. And when you screw up, you got to have enough humility and enough strength and confidence to own your screw up, even no matter who it is, right? And not live in the title. Some people get they get a title, they get a manager title, and all of a sudden they can't even fit through the double doors. Their head's so big, and they're walking around like, I'm the manager. Yeah. And the reality is that is going to kill all relationships. Nobody's interested in connecting with that person.
Or what I've seen so many times too is when you're in a manager position, if there's a lot of weight coming from the top, then that manager has their head down and they're just so focused on grinding on what they're responsible for that they have these blinders on to the people on their team that now they're just using their people on their team as tools. So it doesn't matter how you're treating them. It doesn't matter what they're doing. As a manager, I just need these people and I need them to do their job so I can do my job so I can stop getting chewed out. So it's really, really important if you're, in that position as that manager, like, to pick your head up, to look around, really evaluate how you're treating your people in the midst of your own pressure,
Yep.
and then communicating, upward. That's a whole other topic of managing that from the top.
Go
But
ahead.
it happens all the time.
I think really, though, it's a slippery slope. It really is, and it is so swift. And so just saying this out loud, it's really easy to talk about. Hey, I care for people, right?
Yeah.
I'm not just this shell of a human. I care deeply, but yet still fall into, even knowing this stuff, fall into it at times where I'll get on a phone call, I don't connect, or because I'm busy, or the season is really busy, or all of these things are happening, and I get stuck in the whirlwind and I lose track of it. And so if you're in that boat, take heart, right? You're not alone. And also get back on track. Admit and apologize. Like when trust is broken, or when there's been a series, that doesn't mean that you can't come back from it.
Yeah.
Actually, studies have shown that adversity in that role, in taking ownership and showing that vulnerability and that honesty and that ability to come back from it, is actually more building of trust than not having that adversity at all. And so it's easy to hear this and go like, man, like I intend to do that. Well, one of my favorite quotes is like, intention without direction, you'll never reach your destination. And so you can intend to all day long, but unless you actually do it, or you can do it all day long and it feels disingenuous. And so you really need all three in order to really get there. And it's okay if you steer off course, but just be aware and get back on track swiftly.
Yeah.
That's good.
So any other thoughts when it comes to, before we get into how you increase engagement, any other thoughts on how employees become disengaged in the first place?
I just don't want, because I spent a lot of time there talking about, build the relationship and show care and do all that. And I think a lot of people will interpret that as being soft. And so what I mean by that, that's like everybody gets a trophy and we tolerate poor performance and all. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, I have genuinely cared for somebody so much that I have fired them. And it's, I don't mean that in some way other than what I'm saying. Like, the role doesn't fit. We don't have another role for you here. And I genuinely want to see you successful. And all we're doing is put you in spots where you can't get there and you're struggling for whatever reason. And I want to see you go be successful somewhere and figure this out. It's not here. That's showing care, but that's also holding a high performance.
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean everybody gets a trophy. It doesn't mean running around because somebody, sneezed correctly and I'm going, good job. That's not what I'm talking about. And so I want to clear up any confusion that could happen there. The other side of it too is I've met some managers that, and the word is empathy. They don't have empathy. And again, I don't mean that in a soft sense. Empathy is the ability to see it through the other person's perspective to the point of feeling it. So if I have empathy, I have this ability to kind of sit in their shoes. And the more it goes against my belief system, the harder that typically gets.
Oh yeah.
Right.
For
So
sure.
so it's a political year, and I'm always like I'm looking at the right newscast, the left newscast. I'm looking at both sides. I know this could be a sensitive topic. I'm just going to touch on. You both look at me like, what are you talking about?
Let's go. No, let's go.
But my goal is to, as best I can. I have my own opinions. I have my own things that I value for sure. But my job is, I look at it and go, want to put it in from their perspective, especially if it's a different one than mine. Because if I do that, I can start to see, oh, that's why that matters to you. And why doesn't it matter to me as much? Well, it does. It just doesn't matter on this part. It matters on this part. And it starts to create these bridges. You start to have these conversations. So if I'm managing somebody and I don't have empathy, I'm constantly looking through my lens. And some people think they're looking through somebody else's lens and they're just all wrong. Like, they're terrible at empathy, but they think they know what somebody else is thinking.
Yeah.
And really what they're doing is just projecting what they're thinking onto the other person.
Exactly.
And thinking it's supposed to be the same. That's not empathy. Empathy is truly seeing it from that other lens that's so potentially different than mine and going, gosh, okay, I see it. I see what you're saying. That doesn't change the outcome. That doesn't mean, oh, now all of a sudden you're right and I'm wrong. That's not what it does. It makes it so I can go, okay, that I can see why that sucks. And I see why you're frustrated. And it's not saying the words. You know that manager conversation, you sit down and the manager goes, I can see why that's tough, and that must be, and it's like it's not a real
fired up so quickly. Like, I'm glad you can see it.
Yeah, it's not a real conversation. The real conversation is like it's like, holy, okay, I get it now. I get it. It doesn't change the outcome, but I get where you're coming from. Now, what do we do now? Like it's a different tone. It's a different conversation. It's a different connection in there. And that's where care shows up. And we as human beings, I'm sorry, I'm getting on a rant here, but we as human beings,
No, you're good.
we are wired to be able to tell if somebody's full of it or not. Like we from early on, we've got a BS detector. And when somebody's giving us BS, we're going, that's BS. And a healthy work environment can call that out. It's like, Connor, you're my manager, and I think that was BS. And you go, here's why I think it was BS. And you turn around and go, you know what? You're right. Let's talk about it. And then you dive into it. You want to build trust? Fastest pace to do that.
Yeah, because the word manager has almost become synonymous with being an expert in the BS of human emotion, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like, oh, my manager talked to me about this, but they don't really care. They don't care. So you're almost whenever you get, and I remember feeling this way in my first managerial role, which of course, now we use leader as a way to kind of circumvent that. But it's an uphill battle as soon as you're like, you're my manager now. So the relationship's different, or you're going to treat me different, or you're not going to understand where I'm coming from. So yeah, it's an uphill battle, and going out of the way to build trust is massive, and it does wonders for your effectiveness on your team, and the end product, the end result.
Well, I think the thing is and what you said, Eric, is like we are born with, the ability to see if someone's faking it or not. And I think that's because we're observing so much, especially when you come into a culture. That's why onboarding is so important when it comes to engagement and training. Passionate about speaking of politics. So we have this. It's massively important to think about onboarding and training, because you can say on a document online or on a Indeed ad that you care about people. Does your onboarding show that you care about people? Because it's not necessarily that someone's going to come out and be like, well, we don't care about people. That was a lie. We got you in the door. Huh? It's the fact that you called me on vacation when I was supposed to be on vacation. And it's because I get off at 4 and you schedule a meeting for 4:15, or I'm picking up out of my office and you show up at lunchtime and I don't have an opportunity to take lunch, and you just keep talking through it. And it's all these little things in the very beginning. They say that the first 40 hours of your work determine the majority of all of your experiences at work. And so that is why in previous organizations I've worked with, we literally made an onboarding for an entire week. And we crafted it, and we worked really hard to prove that what we said came to life. And then when it didn't, we owned it and we corrected it, which only furthered what we were attempting to do. And so I just keep coming back to this place where if you're struggling with engagement, look at your onboarding. If you're struggling with engagement, look at your training. If you're struggling in this world where people are getting mixed signals because you're saying one thing and doing another, or your incentives say one thing and you're doing another, if anyone feels that kind of ambiguous place in between these two polarizational ideals, we care or we don't care, we value or we don't value, they're going to lean towards they don't. Not that they do. People tend to believe the worst, not believe the best. And so we have to, and it's unfair. Can we just kind of like rip the Band-Aid off of that? And I've been there as a manager and go like, hey man, this is unfair and it kind of sucks. And I don't love the fact that I'm judged this way or I have to be this way.
Yeah.
But I think you said this, Eric, about emotional intelligence, but I think it applies here too. It's like the person with the more is responsible for it. Is that you say it?
Well, if you're more emotionally intelligent or aware, yes, ultimately it's your responsibility, because the other person doesn't have the skills or equipment to be able to pull it off. So that's...
Yeah, I think it's the same thing here. Like, hey, yes, it's unfair that we have to be on guard on everything and have to create this. But That's the responsibility. That's the role. That is what the outcome is. And if we want people to feel a part of something and like they belong and get the best out of them, that's our duty. And I hate to say, like, deal with it, but it actually is an opportunity, and we get to deal with it, which is really fun if you're in that role for the right reason. So,
You know, I look at it like we're going to dig a ditch, and you were given a shovel and I wasn't. Okay. Or you went and found a shovel and you worked at it and you built a shovel, whatever you want to call it. But you have a shovel and I don't. Well, you're going to be able to dig more of the ditch. You're responsible for digging more of the ditch if we have to get it done together because you've got more tools.
Yeah. I'm really curious,
I don't
and this may be a tangent.
Yeah, we're not going to dig a ditch. He's just going to say, I don't want to dig a ditch.
I don't want to dig a ditch if you don't have a shovel. I'm just going to tell you that. Like, I'm not going to go find a shovel if we need to dig a ditch and we're digging a ditch together.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Did I just look like an Australian breakdancer?
With your hands?
Yeah.
Oh my god!
Was that wrong? That
Oh,
was wrong.
wow.
I know.
No.
You know, I can't even. I shouldn't even do that. I feel so bad
Shots
for that
fired.
girl. That girl has been.
no, you know,
I do.
You know,
I
she,
do.
No.
I do.
No,
I do.
there's been like we need to talk about this offline. I don't know if I feel confident to like post all my thoughts here, but my favorite one that I've seen is actually her on the back of a windshield wiper on the back of an SUV.
I saw that one.
Oh man,
Yeah.
I died on that. But
Yeah.
anyway,
This may be a tangent, and we may cut it. This is me genuinely asking, Eric, do you have strong thoughts or opinions on when people say, like, we're a family at work versus we're a team? Because I do.
Around the word, okay, around the word,
Mm-hmm.
we're a family versus a team. Not so much around the meaning. I do.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so you got. I've been in lots of companies where they call themselves a family. I've been in some companies where that is this incredibly healthy term that means we care for each other. We fight like brother and sister, but outside the company, we are like we're one.
Yeah.
And we run
Yeah.
and all these things. And there's a level, every time I hear somebody say we're a family, there is some level of unhealthiness to it, because if you're a real family, there's a level of unhealthiness to everyone's family.
Yeah.
You know, Uncle Bob came to Thanksgiving dinner again, and sorry, Bob, I do actually have an Uncle Bob. That wasn't directed at you.
So do I.
So my Uncle Bob's awesome. By the way.
I don't have an Uncle Bob.
Bob. But where I think I have the issue is less around whether they want to call themselves a family or not. Usually they're calling themselves a family as an aspirational tone, saying we got each other's back, but they really don't. And a few times they do. Yet the reality is what a family says in a lot of ways is unconditional love. And work teams are conditional. You may care for them and love for them and all those things, but there are conditions to work here.
At the end of the day,
Right.
there is a job to be done. Yeah.
And it's so we can give people a leash, leash, probably a terrible word, but we can give them rein, a rope. We can give them the ability to go. But if they're not going to, sometimes it's a leash. And
Yeah.
but if they're not going to perform, you give them a certain bandwidth, you give them a runway, you commit to the runway, you follow through with the runway. But at the end of the runway, if it's not happening, even though we're family, it goes back to I care so much about you. You got this isn't working.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
work is about teams. It is about people that have, and team comes down to we must perform and we care. Right. And they both matter. And at different times, performance is more important than care sometimes. And sometimes care is more important than performance. And you got to know, you know, what fits.
That's what at Chick-fil-A in New York, and Austin knows this, I personally got burned on that term because we came in and we were rightfully so focused on culture, and we were like, we have to make culture like the number one focus in New York. It's cutthroat. It's and we did that effectively, but we did that through the language of, I remember literally, you know, at orientation with 200 new team members, like, we're going to be a family. And then it comes time to hold people accountable and to let people go. And a few times it was literally told back to me, well, I thought we were a family.
Yeah.
You don't just fire family. And I'm like, well, because we're not really a family. It's a team. And I've always just really preferred that the meaning, like you were saying, of team, because it really clearly communicates on a healthy team. There is strong accountability, strong performance, and strong care for your teammates. So I just thought about it for some reason. Somebody said something that triggered that thought. So.
Well,
Anyway.
it connects into this topic. So this healthy team that when they're super engaged and they're performing, they also won't tolerate low performance.
Right.
And when you go family, that means I'm tolerating, I'll go back to Uncle Bob, not my Uncle Bob, but you're tolerating Uncle Bob showing up for Thanksgiving dinner who hasn't had a job in 2 years and, is everything that, struggles, whatever reason. I don't know, I'm making up a fictional person, but they come in and they're not really holding up to having values, contributing to the world, being whatever it is.
Yeah.
But we still love them. That's family. I would get that. But some people define it differently. I know this one company and they actually have a lot of family that are working in the company and there's so much nepotism that's going on and it makes it so hard to have some of the conversations. And the leader is super strong and will just say what needs to be said a lot of times. But if it wasn't for that super strong leader, when you start getting underneath, it gets difficult to say what needs to be said. Or sometimes it comes through curt and people get hurt feelings over long periods of time because we're family and we go on vacation together and we eat together and we do all these things together. So
Well, I think if you go back to the point here, right, and tying all this together,
which we can. I was definitely planning on cutting this out, but if it applies, we'll leave it.
Well, let me see how if I can
tie it together. Good bow.
Wrangle this bow together really quick here. It goes back to we talked about earlier when it comes to what are the causes of disengagement, and we talked about recognition and we talked about training and onboarding, all these things. But saying one thing and doing another is absolutely it's going to create it and that polarization that we talked about. So if you say you're a family, you got to live up to that.
Well, define it.
I was going to say,
you got to define what it is. You got to, but it comes down to expectations, right?
Yeah.
People, if there's not clarity, like that extrinsic motivation to keep going and to push through and to get through the hard times, they're not going to have it if the expectations aren't clear there and what that looks like, what that means, how that's defined. And they're going to pick out the parts where you're not living up to your commitments, whether you want them to or not. And so unfair or fair, we have to guard the way we speak about things, the way we communicate things, our expectations of what we want our culture to even be. To Eric's point, I've seen the opposite as well. They don't say family. They're not even close to a family. They don't even communicate that they care about somebody. But what they communicate and what they say very clearly is we expect the best, do the best, be the best. We're going to operate as the best, and they get good people, and their culture is very cutthroat, like you said, boiler room type feel, and it works. And they get high performance, and people are super engaged. But it's not out of care for each other; it's out of care or what they're doing and what they're becoming a part of and what they're accomplishing. And so, I really think, as I've experienced a lot of leaders in doing different things here, it's going to say, be authentic to who you are. If you're saying something that you're not, people are going to see it. So be who you are and challenge yourself to be and create what you want to see, do, and create. Like, don't use that as an excuse. Like, I need to be authentic and I'm a jerk, so I'm just going to keep being a jerk. Like, perform better, be better, ascribe to be better, but allow that authenticity to come through what you're doing. Because if you're at the head of the organization is going to look like you anyway. You attract what you deserve from a talent perspective. You are what you repeat. And so behaviors are coming from you. And so really it's this whole idea of consistency and commitments and how those two things intertwine in leadership to create or promote disengagement or engagement.
Well said.
Oh, no, was that a bow? Was that tied? Was that tied, that whole section?
I think you tied it together.
Yeah.
I think I wrestled that down like a bear.
I like it a lot. All right, so let's loop it back into solutions for engagement. We've went on a small tangent there. Let's bring it back at the end of how do you increase engagement? You have employees that go down. We covered how that happens. How do you ramp it back up? How do you get that engagement back in your team and back in your people?
Yeah, so I got bunch of things I'd love to talk about here, but the first and foremost is the overall concept. Okay, so if you take, I may have said this on another podcast, but if you take a culture, you got say about 20% that are in the lower categories, whatever they're the ones that are struggling, they're not engaged, they may be disengaged, they may actively disengaged wherever they are. That bottom 20%. Okay, you got your top 20%, which are your champions. They're crushing it. They're out there. They're going to make it happen, whether or not you really do anything or not, because they know what they're doing. They're going after it. And then you got this huge 60% in the middle. First and foremost, you're going to focus your time on the 60%. We're going to take that 60% and move them. You put it on the lower end, it's a black hole. You're not getting anywhere. You put it on the high end, they're already doing it and maybe get somewhere. But so we're focused on them. 2 is we're focused more on the management and upper leadership than we are the people below them. We've got to up our game at management to be able to up our game down below. So if you just come in on people and go, hey, you're not performing enough, that's not enough. You got to come in and go, I haven't been doing some things. We're going to make some shifts. I'm in this with you. Give me an oar. I'm rolling with you. Right. Yeah. And there's some ownership going on. And then
that's a good way to decrease engagement is to come in and be like, yeah, you guys aren't performing enough. So
you'd be surprised how many companies bring us in and go, hey, train my people. They're not performing. I'm like, that's not how this works. If they're not performing, you're not performing. Yeah. And some like hearing that, some don't like hearing that. But anyway, and then there's the 2 that we already talked about, the 2 main kind of silver bullets that make a massive impact. Your onboarding program. Does it nail it? Is it awesome? I love the way you rolled that out, Austin. You know, if I've got a runway when I come on that I'm really connected with people, I know what I'm doing. I feel part of this group. I know the cultures. I know the processes. I know that stuff. At least I've been introduced to it. I don't feel like I'm in the dark. 1 week of invested time, energy, and focus on them. Maybe some jobs take longer, no question. But you put a weekend where they feel cared for and they feel like, you know what, they really want to see me successful. It's amazing.
Huge difference.
Right? So there's that one, and then it is their relationship with their manager. Those are your 2 lowest hanging fruit. And if I'm a manager and I've got a bad relationship with some of my team, it's your job to fix it. And you go, well, there's no fixing it. Well, then there's no high production. And it just takes 1. If I got a team of 10 people, 1, I don't have a great relationship. The stats show it. It brings the whole team down. It's not the 1. It's impacting all of them. Even if the rest of them are isolated on Zoom calls, working remotely, it still impacts them. So those are the 2 that we can go after. We can dive into how to do that on another one. That'd be another fun one. But work on me being better, and then my other managers. Get a great onboarding and then really connect with those relationships, and that impacts engagement the fastest. There's plenty of other things you can do, but that'll have a big impact. Anything you'd add there, Austin?
We said, by the way, self-improvement does not mean go to the Driven website and buy one of our things.
Yes, it does.
You can absolutely do that. That will increase your engagement to a level seldom people have seen in their life. Unbelievable. You'll become the most
huge.
effective.
Oh my God.
It'd be huge.
But it also can start with, I mean, you're already listening to this podcast, so that starts there. It starts with reading a book, self-reflection, journaling. There's small potatoes to eat before you get to the big old russets. You know what I mean?
Got it. Okay.
That's a weird thing to say, but I would just add this. I don't want you to eat any russets here, but what I would only add to is consistency really matters. And so what we do is when we listen to these podcasts, when we start with the little small potatoes, as Connor said, we don't want to do that. We want to just jump to the russet, and we just want to take over, and we want to just eat the russet.
How did this get here?
New Driven shirt launching soon. Eat the russet. Or no, don't eat the russet. What do we say?
Don't eat the russet.
Don't eat the russet. Yeah.
What we want to do, just simply, we're going to take the word russet out of here. What we want to do is we want to jump to the end result. We want to jump to the destination and go, and we do all these things, and we do them, and then we burn out. We're like a match, and we just, and it's gone. Yeah. That creates even more distrust than what we're attempting to do by doing that. And so start
there's
small.
A huge fall off.
Yeah,
where it's like that they were fine. They were better for 2 weeks. And then they just came in and they were angry and they were disengaged. Like my manager was disengaged and not here anymore. And that's
there's damage.
Way more detrimental.
Yeah, there's damage in the whiplash, right? Like, he hasn't cared about me for months, and now all he does is care about me too much. And then it's like, oh, no, he doesn't care again. Oh, he cares again. And you keep going in this way. It's detrimental. So Commit to a few small things. And if though, like Eric said, onboarding, communication, showing some care, do it in small ways. If you already have one-on-ones, ask about their weekend. Sounds crazy. Really genuinely care. Follow up on what they say. Small things actually make really big impact. And in the same way, employee engagement's a lot like a death by 1,000 toothpicks. It's very often not, a shotgun to the chest and that person's just like immediately disengaged. It's small little pricks. And so in the same way, we fix engagement normally in the same way as a manager. Just start putting Band-Aids on those little pricks, and all of a sudden we will heal the relationships that are detrimental, and we will see better engagement.
Take care of the pricks in your business.
Yes. And build up on your potatoes.
One russet at a time.
I think one of the really easy ways to do it, which we mentioned earlier, is just recognition. We do the Summit online course, and we're doing a class right now on communication. And one of the attendees, students, whatever, I don't know what we call them, one of the students, all he's done is in his meetings just started listening more, started communicating more intentionally. And even in the 2 to 3 weeks that he's been doing that, he's come back with hey, this actually works. And there's people have been responding to it and have been commenting on it. There's such small things when you really look at the 10,000 foot view of somebody's leadership. There's so many little things that you can start doing. Recognition is such an easy one. It may not come naturally. It may be awkward at first when you're just like, hey, good job on that. But people need to hear that. They want to hear that. So anything else? Any other thoughts on?
I have lots, but it's not gonna. No.
I think this has been a good like intro of what is engagement, things to avoid to decrease engagement, how do you bring it back up? And like I said at the very beginning, there's going to be a lot of times we talk. We've already said some of these statistics in previous episodes, and it's just because engagement is such a big part of leadership. It is the biggest thing, arguably, because it's literally how engaged are the people that are under you. And there's so many things to do. So we'll absolutely dive in more. And we want to hear your stories of engagement, your issues with engagement, your success stories with engagement. How have you steered the ship in the right direction in your own company? You can email us at info@drivenleadership.com. You can leave a comment on the platform that you're listening on. We want to hear those stories because this is a huge part of what we do at Driven. So any other thoughts or comments before we jump off here?
We'll make it happen.
Yep. One prick at a time.
One prick at a piece. One russet at a time.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for listening, everybody. To those who stick around to the end of every episode, we appreciate you. Share it with a friend. Share it who's somebody who is struggling with engagement in their business. And we'll see you in the next episode.